Hello everyone, welcome back to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, dated 14th November 2025. Today again we will be discussing some important topics that has appeared in today's The Hindu and the Indian Express newspapers, which are very relevant for your examination. In the initial two topics, we have included two mains practice questions which will be useful for your upcoming mains examination. So in our first topic, we'll expose the fast unfolding medical crisis where everyday infections outsmart our strongest drugs, pushing humanity towards a post-antibiotic nightmare. After that, in our second topic, we'll track how the State Election Commission is racing against time and controversy to safeguard the ballot, scrutinizing voter list, sealing loopholes, and defending the integrity of India's grassroots democracy. After that, in our simplified section, we'll take up 5 articles and we'll try to explain them in simplest language possible to enrich your understanding of the newspapers. Additionally, we have also incorporated some prelims pointers which is going to be crucial for your upcoming prelims and mains examinations. So have a look on them also and stay tuned. So let's start with the first topic, that is the silent superbug revolution when medicines no longer work. All of you are preparing for the civil services examination and you would be aware of the fact that there are certain books which are very relevant for this examination. Let's suppose there is a book with the name of ABC, which book is not giving proper conceptual understanding. It is a collection of fact and it is a kind of guidebook, but every year there are questions that are asked from this particular book in the pre and mains examination and we are able to solve questions in the actual examination. UPSC also analyzes all these patterns which keeps on going in the market, and let's suppose they directed their examiners or the people who makes the questions for the examination that do ensure that there are no questions that are asked from this particular book. Do ask questions from the conceptual books or the NCERTs, etc. So what we saw that this particular book which was very effective against the questions that were thrown by the UPSC in the earlier examinations has now become ineffective in tackling the questions that are coming in front of aspirants. This is the same case that happens with the antimicrobial resistance, which is an umbrella term for antiviral, antibacterial or antifungal resistance. Any of the microbes which with time evolves and whatever the drugs that were very effective earlier becomes ineffective against that microbes is the case of antimicrobial resistance. For example, let's suppose TB or the tuberculosis, which is a bacterial disease caused by the bacteria Mycobacterium tuberculosis. There are various antibacterial drugs that are used against this TB. For example, rifampicin is there, isoniazid is there. So these are the drugs which are effective against the tuberculosis. But what if this patient was suffering from the tuberculosis, doesn't complete the course which is recommended by the doctors? And what if he was not also following all the do's and don'ts which were recommended by the doctor itself? Now slowly and gradually these first line drugs or the antibiotics can become ineffective against that Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Also, this bacteria can spread from this person to others in the community. This can also spread from the hospitals when this person will be visiting. So slowly and gradually we have seen that this bacteria for which these drugs were earlier very effective, now this bacteria has developed antibacterial resistance against these drugs. And there is a report by WHO that is with the name of GLASS, that is Global Antibiotic Resistance Surveillance Report of 2025, which has showed the alarming condition of antimicrobial resistance and especially in India. And that is the reason this write-up is focusing on that AMR. And this particular topic is related to your GS paper 2 health. Now what exactly the report is saying? So report is saying that India is among the highest AMR burden globally. In 2023, 1 in 3 bacterial infections which were resistant were in India itself, whereas the global average was 1 in 6. And Southeast Asia shows the similar severe trends itself. Also, why this high resistance level? First of all, especially the over-the-counter drugs that are used by the people. These are the drugs which can be bought from the medical stores without prescription itself. Overuse and misuse of these drugs, or the self-medication incomplete courses which we do. All these reasons why we are witnessing such a burden of AMR, we will be discussing in detail. And the major pathogens which we are witnessing are like E. coli or others. And these particular pathogens are readily available in the water bodies. For example, the major rivers, you will find some presence of this E. coli bacteria. And this severe resistance particularly was also found in ICUs of the hospitals. Why? Because when people visit the hospital for their treatment, there are high chances that this particular antibacterial resistance bacteria will also go from that particular patient to other people itself. So hospitals has also slowly and gradually became the hotbeds of this particular antimicrobial resistance bacteria or any kind of other pathogen. Now, how exactly this resistance happens and how exactly this spreads? Let's suppose there are some antibiotics which are taken by the patients, which are given to the patients, and now this particular person who has to take the full course of that antibiotic drug has left that drug because the whatever the symptoms that person had has slowly and gradually subsidized. Now, this particular person might become drug resistant to the bacteria which were given to that particular person. And now, when that bacteria will be already there in the gut of that particular person and that person will visit the hospital, then that bacteria can spread from that particular person to the rest of the community, to the rest of people who were in the hospitals. Similarly, let's suppose antibiotics are given to the food producing animals and crops. For example, colistin is one of that antibacterial drug which is given to the poultry and especially to improve the productivity, etc. Now, let's suppose slowly and gradually that also might become ineffective to whatever the attacks that were happening or the infections that were happening in the agriculture or especially in the poultry farming. So animals also develops the drug resistance bacteria in their guts, and whenever this drug resistance bacteria reaches humans through food, environment, water, soil or air, for example, whatever the excretion that is being done by the poultry, if that is near the human population itself, or human itself are consuming those products, so that drug resistant bacteria can spread from this particular animal to the humans itself. And then human, when they will be having that and they will visit the general public, that can spread to the overall community also. And this is the case that antibiotic resistance happens when the bacteria changes and become resistant to the antibiotic that is used to treat the infections they cause. And this is what we were discussing. Now, what exactly are the reasons for this rising antimicrobial resistance, and particularly in India? India has a huge population with rising climate change, plus with the increased burden of diseases, especially the communicable diseases that we are witnessing. The chances of more prevalence of more or newer kind of diseases are also being witnessed in India. And that is the reason people are taking medicines to subsidize the symptoms for that. And that is one of the major reasons that overuse and misuse of antibiotics, because of which we are witnessing the drug resistance, the bacteria that are being developed in the human bodies. For example, this is one of the study that was done by the ICMR that antibiotic intake in India rises by 30% in a decade from 2010 to 2020. Also, 30% increase in per capita use of antibiotics in India in the past decade. 47.40 change in the total use between 2010 to 2020. Also, 65% rise in antibiotic consumption between 2000 and 2015 globally itself. And this particular data has risen significantly in last few years itself. For example, after the COVID-19, when you see that people also understood about various medicines, anyone, when even in the normal cold or flu like symptoms, when that comes in the person, they resort to taking the azithromycin or other antibacterial drugs, and the antibiotic drugs which even they do not know that whether that will be effective against the flu, whether that will be effective against the cold or not. So this overuse and misuse has been one of the important reasons why we are witnessing the increased cases of AMR. Also, the self-medication, that 60% of patients did not complete their prescribed course of antibiotics as per ICMR. For example, DOTS, which is a course for the tuberculosis, that is a course of 6 months itself. But because of the poor awareness, because of a poor track about the patients generally leaves their courses midway itself. And that again leads to the development of that AMR. Also, this is again one of the data that is given by the WHO that says that 75% of Indians in a WHO survey thought incorrectly that colds and flu can be treated with antibiotics itself. These antibiotics are not effective against these colds and flu. Similarly, 58% of respondents knew they should stop taking antibiotics only when they finish the course prescribed. any person who is recommending you any of the medicine, they have already done MBBS, MD, or whatever the degree they have. And after doing that study, after understanding the importance of each drug against any of the disease, they are prescribing that drug or that medicine to you, or they are giving that prescription, understanding what can be the future implications. So when we go for this self-medication, and that too with the help of internet, etc., that may be very dangerous for our health and also for the overall community. Also, the contaminated food and water, that especially the E. coli and other bacteria like salmonella. So what happens that these majorly comes from the fecal materials of the humans. And you know that, for example, the rivers which are considered very sacred in India. So the bathing happens on the banks of these rivers. Plus the cities are also major cities, populous cities are located along the banks of these rivers. There are special festivals when people bath in these rivers. So there may be a case that when these bacteria are already present in the contaminated water, people can ingest that, or they can transfer from that water to the human body, and slowly and gradually that can spread from that particular person to the rest of the community itself. Similarly, that we have saw that use that is done in the animal, in the farms, etc., the use of antibiotics. When people are consuming that food, that can also lead to transfer of that that superbug to the humans itself. Also, the poor infection control practices, that the PHC and the CSCs, they are not aware about the SOPs, the standard operating procedures that they should be resorting to. They do not have the proper resources at their disposal. They are overburdened with the already work that they have. Understaffing, that is again one of the major issues because of which the overburdening of the work that we are witnessing. The ASHA workers, that is accredited social health activists, etc., or the other important this AWC, the community health workers, etc., which are there in the rural areas, they are an important pillar in tackling the communicable disease, or increasing the awareness. But again, they are overburdened with lot of other works. For example, these ASA workers also has to do the surveys, they also have to ensure the vaccinations, etc. And that is one of the reasons why we do not have the poor infection control practices, and we are not able to tackle that in a time-bound manner. Then also the agricultural use of antibiotics, that has been one of the major issue because of the increased climate change, increased attacks that we are witnessing. For example, locust attack on the agricultural fields, or what we witness in the diseases, prevalence of disease in poultry, etc. And that was one of the reason colistin, that is one of the antibiotic drug that was banned in 2019 in the food industry itself. Also, the inadequate waste management, that is what exactly the proper process of the waste management, that collection is happening properly, segregation is happening properly, and then disposal is happening properly. If there are certain wastes that are coming from the hospitals, that is dangerous to the human health, and that might have presence of some kind of these bacteria or microbes, that needs to be disposed safely so that it should not leak from that waste material itself. But again, because of the poor hygiene practices that are resorted by the people, it becomes really difficult to manage that bacteria. And then the lack of awareness, that and this is in the whole process, be it with the awareness with the people, awareness with the community, still people are not understanding the correct use of antibiotics, correct use of the medicines. They just understand that I should take any of the medicines and I should get the relief in the symptoms or the poor condition that I am witnessing, so that I can continue with my work itself. But whatever the long-term implications that drug might have on the human health, that people are not able to understand. For example, the analgesics which people uses, the increased use of analgesics can impact the kidney, or they can also impact certain other vital organs. But people do not understand. In a case of even the mild fever itself, people take the Dolo 650 or other medicines which has become very popular, especially after the COVID-19. Also, this is again the data from the ICMR and the WHO that says that India is the largest consumer of antibiotics in the world, though developed countries have a high per capita consumption. And that is one of the reasons India is one of the highest exporter of generic medicines, and especially in the countries like United States. And that was one of the reasons you would have seen that the US administration did not impose any high tariff on these generic medicines. Why? Because people in US are highly dependent on these generic medicines medicines, especially the new kind of diseases or the lifestyle diseases like diabetes, etc., which are being witnessed highly in the US. Also, between 2005 to 2009, the consumption in the country shot up by 40%, and similar data we have also seen in last few years itself. And this data that we can remember, that is from the Lancet 2024, that in 2021 the current impact was 4.7 million related deaths were related to AMR, which is projected to increase to 8.2 million by 2050. That within 29 year itself we will see a double growth in the deaths related to the AMR itself. Now, what exactly we can do? What is the way forward? Before looking into that, what are the major impacts of this AMR? First of all, the economic losses that it leads. For example, as per WHO, a continued rise in antimicrobial resistance would lead to global reduction of 2.9 to 3.5% in GDP by 2050 itself. Also, the health concerns, that it can overburden the already understaffed medical facilities that are there. It can also increase the out-of-pocket expenditure of the people, and that can further perish people in the poverty. Let's suppose there is a poor person who already did not have the proper resources. If they will have to spend a huge amount from their own pocket to get the treatment of any of these antibacterial resistant related disease, then that person might have to leave their daily wage, their daily work, and in that case it will be very difficult for that person to manage their finances. Also, the superbug that can be developed, that may develop because of this resistance that may happen over the period of time. Now, this superbug might be very difficult to deal, because whatever the research and development that we have already done, maybe that resources, that whatever the information or whatever the technology that we have, that might not be suitable or that might not be effective in addressing that superbug. And if that spreads in the whole community, that can create a huge challenge for the overall health infrastructure. Also, increased risk of nosocomial infection, that is the hospital-borne infections that happens, that people are going for the treatment in the hospitals, and if they are coming with a new kind of infection from the hospital, so that can create complications. Also, the increased morbidity, that more deaths that can happen, that as per this data of WHO, if AMR is not addressed, 10 million people are expected to die annually because of the drug resistance by 2050. And in last 25 years, virtually no new antibiotic have been developed, and world can expect to lose about 100 trillion US dollar worth of economic output by 2050 if antimicrobial drug resistance is not tackled properly. Also, what should be done? What should be way forward? First of all, the strict enforcement of drug regulations, that especially the drugs which should not be given without prescriptions, there should be strict enforcement of that whatever the sale of the antibiotic drugs that are happening, a proper prescription should be uploaded on any of the portal itself, so that all the medical stores can ensure that they are maintaining a record of all the sales of antibiotics that they are doing. That can help us in addressing the overuse and misuse of antibiotics. Also, the capacity building and hand holding, especially of the research and development infrastructure, that as of now we are spending around 0.6 to 0.7% of our GDP on research and development, and majority of that is coming from the public sector itself. But what if the private sector further participates and they also do the research and development? They can develop new kind of antibacterial drugs that can be effective in the new kind of diseases which has already become resistant to the present antibiotics. Also, the public awareness needs to be increased, that people should understand that what are the various cases only when they should take the antibiotics. There are various portals that are available under the government websites itself, under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, where they are also helping you to consult with the relevant doctors. So people can also consult to those doctors. That is a free service. Plus, always try to avoid the self-medication. Then increased research and development that we have already talked, and we can follow some of the best practices. For example, Kerala's Operation Amrit, that prohibits the over-the-counter sales of antibiotics without the prescription. What were the over-the-counter sales, over-the-counter medicines? The medicines that can be bought without prescription itself. But again, There are some antibiotics which are over the counter, but they might also lead to the antibacterial resistance itself. So that is one of the reasons they have prohibited sale of that. Also, Kerala has implemented the 2011 H1 rule that prohibits the OTC sales of all classes of antibiotics. Kerala's high doctor patient ratio even in village may help in enforcing the H1 rule, because they will have that resources, because of which they can increase the public awareness. Over 50 to 70% of antibiotic prescriptions by doctors are deemed unnecessary and irrational. And that is again that you people might have also witnessed whenever you might have visited some doctor, that by seeing the list of medicines itself that they prescribe, it becomes very difficult to understand that, okay, am I that sick that I need this much of medicine? Reducing the incident of hospital-acquired infection will sharply and quickly reduce the demand of antibiotics. All hospitals should be made to report rates of hospital-acquired infection, that is non-nosocomial infections that we were discussing. And also, rationalizing antibiotic use in hospitals, curbing antimicrobial resistance requires a multi-pronged approach. So what we are witnessing that from the Kerala model, that they are not focusing on any one direction itself, rather from the patients to the doctors to the medical stores to overall hospitals, they are going for a multi-pronged approach. That is the need of hour. Also, there are some other measures that can be incorporated. For example, One Health approach, that is again a very important factor that can be considered, and this is one of the diagram that you can make in your mains answers also, that is healthy people, healthy environment and healthy animals. We should consider the health of the animal and this human as well as environment in one place itself, at one place itself. We should not keep it in silos itself. That if there will be healthy environment, there will be healthy human, there will be healthy animals, and similarly there are healthy animals, that will also lead to healthy people and healthy environment. So whatever the policies that are being made or whatever the measures that will be taken in future, they should be taken comprehensively, taking into account the health of the animal, people and health itself. That is the One Health approach that can be promoted, that kept in mind while going for the policy making. Also, we can strengthen the knowledge evidence through a proper AMR surveillance, that we are again what we have seen in the Kerala model, that they are keeping a proper data related to the AMR, the hospital infections or other infections that are happening in the community, so that we can come with the tailor-made policy according to the data that is coming related to the AMR itself. Also, we can go for the effective infection control measures. For example, quarantines etc. can also happen, and this can help us in addressing this issue. This is one of the question that is related to this particular topic, and that was asked in 2019. You people answer this particular question in the comment box. In the initial discussion, when I was talking about the sources for this particular examination, believe me, one such source from which every year there are questions that are being asked is the NCERTs. They were important, they are important, and they will be important, because that is one of the basic source that is readily available from north to south and then from west to east itself. For example, class 11th physical geography NCERT, every year there are questions that are being asked. Class 12th macroeconomics NCERT, every year there are questions that are being asked from that particular book. In 2025 prelims examination, there was one question that can be solved from page number 64, that was related to fiscal deficit of that class 12 macroeconomics book. One question related to primary deficit that can be solved from page number 65 of that book. One question related to the components of budget that can be solved from one of the chart that is given on page number 62 of that book. So please focus on these basic materials properly, because UPSC tests your conceptual understanding, and there are high chances that they will be asking questions from these basic sources. And this is one of the mains practice question that you people can write from this particular topic of AMR. Our next topic is, how is SEC or State Election Commission ensuring fair elections? And the context of this topic is that following the Supreme Court directions, Maharashtra will hold the local body elections in 3 phases, that is beginning on December 2. And this topic is related to your GS paper 2, local self-government. So elections, especially the local body elections, were pending in Maharashtra from past few years itself. And there has been delay because of certain litigations related to the reservation that needs to be provided to various communities. But Supreme Court directed the Maharashtra Election Commission, the State Election Commission, to conduct elections. But still there were various delays, and that was one of the reasons the State Election Commission of Maharashtra was pulled up by the Supreme Court. Now what exactly happens that this state election commission, who have the power of direction, superintendence and control of local body elections, and that is one of the reason that there is need for preparation of electoral rules for conducting any election. But here, under the state act, the local body act of the state itself, the SEC or the state election commission, they does not prepare any separate voter list for the local body elections. Rather, what they do, they uses the voter list that is prepared by the election commission under the Representation of People Act 1950, and then they bifurcate them to represent the relevant votes of the local bodies that are concerned. For example, let's suppose this is one of the assembly constituency, and there were 100 people whose name were there in the electoral roll that was prepared by the Election Commission of India under the RP Act 1950. Now, to conduct the local body election, this assembly will be divided into different smaller wards, and this 100 people will be accordingly adjusted, their names will be adjusted in different wards, and that person will be only giving their vote in that ward itself. But the allegations that were levied by the opposition parties is that whatever the list that has been prepared by the State Election Commission, there were various duplicacy that is there, that one person's name is there in different wards, and now there may be a case that that person might be giving or casting his vote in different wards itself. So the State Election Commission does not have any power to add or delete names, because they are directly taking the names from the list that is already prepared by the Election Commission of India itself. However, they will supervise the local body election, they will divide the names in the different wards, and then there are different checks and balances that are there. For example, once they will prepare the draft list, they will publish that draft list that these are the people whose name are in different wards. And if they will get the objections about the duplicacy, so there are various other checks that are available. For example, their name will go to the Chief Electoral Officer, who will receive the list of duplicate name. They will mark these entries with the stars and undertake a field verification. The voter will have to give an undertaking about the booth at which they will vote. Also, these undertakings will be kept with the marked copies of the electoral roll at each polling centers to ensure no voter votes in more than one place. But the critics are saying that all this exercise will take time, and with the limited time that we are having to go for the elections, it will be very difficult to conduct all this exercise itself. Also, as of now, for the upcoming local body election, the Maharashtra State Election Commission will use the electoral list of July 1, 2025 itself. And the list containing the inclusion and changes made by the Chief Electoral Office up to the date itself. However, the cutoff date for the first time voter was not revised after January 1, 2025. That means that if someone got the age of 18 years on January 1, 2026, they will not be able to cast their vote. So young voters might be deprived of casting their votes. These are some of the apprehensions which has been raised by the opposition parties and people involved. Now, what exactly is the Election Commission? So they were established after the 73rd and 74th Constitution Amendment Act were done. And their main core function is to ensure free, fair and impartial elections to all the local bodies, that is panchayats and municipalities in the state. For panchayats at the lower level, we have the Gram Sabha, that is village assembly, then we have the village panchayat. Above that, we have the block or taluka panchayat, and above that, we have the Jila Parishad. And for the municipalities, we have the ward or the ward meetings that happens for the municipal areas mainly. And then we have the Nagar Panchayat, then we have the municipal council, and then we have the municipal corporation. That is the ascending order. Now, to conduct the elections for these local bodies, the Article 243 K subclause 1 that provides for SEC that vests superintendent's direction and control of preparation of electoral rolls, conduct of panchayat elections and municipal elections under Article 243 ZA. However, this electoral rolls, the mechanism with which this will be prepared, that is based on the specific act of that particular state. So here, why the Maharashtra SEC is following the list, the electoral roll of Election Commission of India, electoral roll that is prepared by the Election Commission of India. Why? Because that has been provided by the act of that Maharashtra state itself. Also, the Article 243 K subclause 2 that provides for tenure and appointment of that is provided by the state legislature law, and they also provide for the removal protection. For example, if you talk about the structure of this state election commission, they are headed by a state election commissioner. They are appointed by the governor for a tenure of 5 years, and they are removed only like a high court judge. That is total half of the 50% of the total membership and 2/3 of the people who are present and voting. And that is the reason why this special majority which has been kept for the removal of High Court judge, and similar is the case with the State Election Commissioner. That ensures the independence. Also, they are appointed by the governor. They can be removed only by the president itself. That also ensures their independence. Now, what are the functions of State Election Commissioner? First of all, they conduct elections to rural and urban local bodies, the panchayats, municipal corporations, etc. Also, they have to conduct election within 6 months itself if there is supersession of any panchayat. Also, they uses ECI voter list, and that they bifurcate ward wise, and that helps them in ensuring that they are preparing the electoral roll for each ward. They also conduct delimitation before every 5-year general local body election. That is the adjustment that they do for specific wards, and then they also gets the objections against that. Also, they enforces the model code of conduct. So what exactly is the model code of conduct? That is the set of guidelines that is issued by the Election Commission of India for the conduct of political parties and candidates during the elections. And model code of conduct comes into force immediately with the announcement of election schedule by the commission for ensuring free and fair elections. And the enforcement of model code of conduct during the local body elections, that is the power that has been given to the State Election Commission. Also, they mainly use the moral sanction for its enforcement. It is not explicitly backed by any law. Now, what are the moral sanctions? For example, in case of violation, some notices can be given, some warnings can be given to the candidates. Also, the power of registering the political party, that is with the Election Commission of India itself, and that is provided under Section 29A of Representation of People Act 1951 itself. Now, moving further, what are the major issues that are being faced by the Election Commission with regard to the functioning? First of all, the financial and the functional dependence, that is the budget dependence on the state, staff shortages, weak autonomy, the voting that is done on their funds, that is not expenditure is not charged. Also, the Sri Krishna Committee of 2018, they said that most of the state election commissions, they are facing severe resource constraints, and that is one of the reasons that their functioning is also getting hampered. Also, the Odisha State Election Commission in 2022, they were facing inadequate officials due to lack of government sanction itself. Why? Because the bureaucracy which is there, they are generally utilized for the conduct of election, for the functioning of the State Election Commission, and that was one of the reasons why some of the state governments were pulled up by the Supreme Court also. Why? Because there were various serving bureaucrats who were appointed as the State Election Commissioner itself, and that may create a problem that there may be some partisan behavior that may be done by a serving bureaucrat when they are serving as the State Election Commissioner. Also, the political interference in appointment removal, that is the executive control that they have. The governor who appoints the State Election Commissioner, that is mainly by the recommendation of Council of Ministers itself. That might compromise the neutrality of the people who is getting appointed. Also, for example, the Goa SEC case where the law secretary was appointed as the SEC and Supreme Court quashed that notification. Also, there has been delay in conducting local body elections. There are various expired terms, and that too for more than 1 year, and still the functioning of that local body is happening with the help of the officers, civil servants itself, and that create a governance vacuum that also impacts the local self-government where the needs of the people are not getting represented at the higher level. The ADR report of 2022 says that 9 states delayed the urban local body or the panchayat polls. Also, the weak enforcement power versus the Election Commission of India, that leads to limited model code of conduct enforcement, reliance on state police, that to ensure that the model code of conduct is properly enforced. For example, checks of vehicles happen, that majorly is done by the state police officer itself, and if the state government will not sanction the state police to be deployed for the conduct of elections, it might be difficult for the enforcement of the model code of conduct. For example, West Bengal Panchayat election of 2022, poor police support, there were various violence that happened in the conduct of election. That also led to death of several innocent civilians. Also, the poor digital infrastructure, transparency gaps, for example, weak IT system that is there, manual data handling that happens, that also creates problem for inclusion and exclusion error, that might also lead to data error. And low voter roll auditing, that the auditing doesn't happen properly, that also creates the problem of duplications, multiplicity, presence of number at multiple wards. And that is one of the reason that Delhi SEC that is there, they have completely gone online for the electoral roll handling, etc. Whereas for the Bihar, it is mainly as of now done manually itself, that increases the chances of errors. Low voter awareness and participation, the poor outreach and lower turnout, and that is one of the reason government is thinking to go with this one nation one election, where that local body elections will be also done slowly and gradually, that will be aligned with the general election and assembly elections itself. For example, urban local body turnout often that is around 35 to 55%, and in Mumbai BMC that was 42% in 2017 and 44% in 2022. Recently in Bihar you can see the high voter turnout, it was more than 65%, which is historic. So that is one of the reasons, the urban apathy that we can say, that people are not interested in casting their votes. They have that feeling that my one vote cannot change the thing. And when there are frequent frequent elections that happen, then again people think that they may avoid the election itself. And that is one of the reason that you can see the low voter turnout in the state election, in the local body elections. And that has been one of the major concern, that the state election commissions are not able to increase that awareness, that participation of people can increase. Also, the measures to strengthen the election commission, what exactly can be done? First of all, there can be independent budget, that budget can be charged, also that can be linked to the consolidated fund of the state, and there can be an own administrative cadre of the state elections that can be provided, so that the issue of the manpower that can be addressed. Also, the collegium based appointment that was recommended by the second ARC, that governor appoint as of now state election commissioner on the they must avoid, or they may avoid, on the advice of CM plus speaker plus leader of opposition in the assembly, and they should be provided with the fixed tenure to ensure the neutrality and also protection from the arbitrary removal. For example, that can there has been various controversies with regard to the state election commissioners appointment and removal in past in Goa and Andhra Pradesh, that can be addressed. In Chandigarh election of 2024, you people might have seen one of the video of CCTV where one of the official was manipulating the electoral slips. So those kind of issues, those kind of arbitrary actions can be addressed if there will be fixed tenure, if the person will be appointed, officials will be appointed after proper checks and proper or due checks. Also, independent secretariat, that was also recommended by the Law Commission 255th report, that said that permanent secretariat like Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha can be provided to the Election Commission of India, and similar secretariat can be also provided to the state election commission, so that whatever the works that they generally do before the election at the last hour itself, they are already done in due time itself, and that will also limit the issue of the duplication, that will also limit the inclusion and exclusion error. Also, ECI SEC coordination mechanism, that was also recommended by the second ARC, that there can be a joint platform for training IT systems best practices, and they can also share resources, standard training procedures. For example, with regard to the state public service commissions, there are again different meets that keeps on happening, where the UPSC shares some of the best practices with the state public service commissions also, which they are implementing, that is also improving their functioning and efficiency. Also, there can be uniform state election law. For example, model SEC Act can come from the central government itself. For example, for the prisons, there is Model Prisons Act that came with the central government. Model Contract Farming Act is there. So similar Model SEC Act can also come with the standard rules on reservation, delimitation, tenure, etc. Also, time-bound elections needs to be done to ensure that governance deficit is not there. Also, in stronger enforcement powers, for example, clear model code of conduct, and these powers to requisite the police officers, and that is important to avoid any kind of violence, etc., that can be witnessed. Also, the voter awareness programs, local sweep, that is systematic voters education and electoral participation, which is one of the important initiative of Election Commission of India. So that can be also done at the local level by the State Election Commission also, to improve the voter turnout, to address the issue of urban apathy. Also, fast track judicial oversight. For example, there can be dedicated benches to deal with the issues related to the local body polls. Also, this is a mains practice question that you people can write from this particular topic. In our simplified section, first topic is, can Tamil Nadu's reforms change the transgender healthcare? This is related to your GS paper 2, issues related to transgenders, welfare schemes, gender equality, government policies and interventions, and this has appeared in today's The Hindu, page number 10. So, who exactly is a transgender? As per this Transgender Act of 2019, that provides the definition that any person whose gender at birth doesn't match with their gender identity. That includes trans women, trans man, trans woman, intersex variations, gender queer and socio-cultural identities with whatever names they are called. The objective of this act was to ensure rights of equality, welfare and non-discrimination of transgender persons, and this act commenced on 10th January 2020. Also, there were various sections that were provided under that. For example, section 3 that prohibits the discrimination, that no discrimination should be done at the workplace, education, healthcare, public good, movement, residence, holding offices or access to services. And that is one of the reason Tamil Nadu has emerged as a pioneer in addressing these inequities through inclusive public health policies and welfare schemes that recognizes the intersection of health, dignity and social rights. That Tamil Nadu is focusing on the ideas that these people are also normal human beings. They need proper access to the different resources, be it related to the education, healthcare, etc., to have a dignified life. And this idea also supports this philosophy of leaving no one behind, which is a core principle of United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and universal health coverage, that urges the government to prioritize the health care for the most marginalized, whether it is the geriatric care which we need to focus, or whether it is the focus of the young children, the adolescents or the girl child, etc. For example, Kerala came with the dedicated commission for old age people. That is also in line with this idea itself. And why do transgender persons face health barriers? First of all, there are few healthcare providers who are trained in the transgender health. The complications that these people are subjected to, there is less amount of knowledge and training that the medical officers have, especially who are deployed at the ground level to deal with that kind of complications. Another important is the systemic exclusion from education, housing, employment and social security, that leaves many without stable income or insurance. That if a person is not having a proper source of income, they are not registered with the EPFO, they are not having the social security benefit in the form of insurance, even when they will be having the need to consult any doctor, they might avoid that because that might take a strain on their pocket itself. Third, the stigma and discrimination in health setting, along with poor awareness among the both providers and the public, that also create a hostile healthcare environment that erodes their trust in the public system, the stereotyping against them. And also, what has been the major works that Tamil Nadu has done? First of all, the transgender inclusive healthcare. Since 2008, Rajiv Gandhi Government General Hospital in Chennai has offered gender affirming surgery that is supported by India's first transgender welfare board. Also, this began many years before the 2019 Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act that came. And also, the National Health Mission that Tamil Nadu established gender guidance clinics in 2018 to provide multidisciplinary care under one roof itself. And for example, counseling facilities, surgery facilities, etc. are being given to these persons at one roof itself. They will not have to run from pillar to post to different places. Also, by 2025, 8 districts in a state host this gender guidance clinic offering free gender affirming procedures, and between April 2019 and March 24, 7,644 transgender individuals access these clinics. So if there is a question that is being asked related to the transgender, the best practices or the model that you can write is the Tamil Nadu itself. And Tamil Nadu has integrated gender affirming surgeries and hormonal therapy into the Chief Minister's Comprehensive Health Insurance Scheme in 2022. Also, There has been other policy and legal reforms. For example, 2019 Transgender Act Section 15 that mandates comprehensive health care, and Tamil Nadu has begun moving the needle. In October 24, the National Health Mission trained doctors from this uh, gender guidance clinic on the World Professional Association for Transgender Health Standard of Care version 8. And also the 2019 Tamil Nadu mental health care policy and 2025 state policy for transgender persons further affirm the healthcare, education and property rights. Also, this gender guidance clinic they must be expanded to provide comprehensive primary to tertiary care. And also publish a dedicated health manual, regularly build provider competency and hold them accountable, regulate impaneled hospitals. There should be a proper oversight mechanism whether these hospitals are giving proper dignified services to these people or not. And also a sustained commitment and action can transform the Tamil Nadu's promising model into lasting equity for transgender persons. Other sections which were there in the Transgender Act Protection of Rights of 2019, for example, Section 4 Right to Identity, self-perceived gender identities can be recognized. Section 5-6 Certificates of Identity, that application can be given to district magistrate and DM issues the certificate, and that is updated in all official records. Section 7 calls for change in gender, and that happens post the SRS that is given to them. Apply for the revised certificate with medical proof, allowed to change name and gender in documents. Section 8 provides for government welfare duties, that there can be dedicated schemes that can come for their welfare, rescue, rehabilitation. Section 9 to 11 for duties of establishment, that there should not be any stereotyping, any job discrimination, any violence at the workplace, and there should be a proper complaints officer that should be dedicated. Section 12 right of residence, they cannot be separated from family. If they are feeling unsafe and unwilling, court ordered rehabilitation home where they can go. Section 13 to 15 education, social security, health, there is need for inclusive education, vocational training, etc. Section 16 to 17 National Council, which will be chaired by the Union Minister of Social Justice and Environment, that will also include the representatives from states and other representatives from non-governmental organizations. The main function of this council is to advise, review and monitor, readdress whatever the issues that are coming in front of them. Section 18 talks about offences and penalties. For example, in any case of abuse, forced labor, eviction, denial of passage, there can be a penalty of 6 months to 2 years, fine or both. And then there are some other sections related to section 19 and 23 that talk about the supplementary law, grants, rule making powers, etc. Our next topic is urgent update, which is focusing on the fact that India needs to revise its consumer price index urgently. And this has appeared in today's The Hindu page number 8, and this is related to your GS paper 3 growth and development. So the retail inflation data for October once again underscores the fact that update of consumer price index cannot be delayed further. Also, the data shows that rate of overall inflation fell to just 0.25%, lowest it has been since January 2012. On the face of it, this would be the cause of celebration, but a deeper look reveals the drastic fall is because of the statistical anomaly. Why? The food and beverages category saw prices falling to 3.7% in October, the largest in the history of CPI current series. However, the main reason for this contraction was not as such fall in the prices of these food articles, but because food inflation in October last year was much high, that was 9.7%, and because of the high base, that when it was 9.7%, and then we'll see a much higher inflation if we'll compare from that year. The food inflation in October 2025 was negative, even though if you will observe in your markets, the prices of vegetable and fruits are not less. And also with the food and beverages category that is enjoying around 45.86% the contribution weightage in this particular overall CPI, the statistical anomaly that we are witnessing, the food inflation was responsible for pulling down the entire CPI index down. And what exactly is this CPI? This index, which is calculated for rural area, urban area, and then for combined, that tracks the change in retail prices of goods and services which households purchases for their daily consumption. Earlier base year for this CPI was 2012, and now it has been revised to 2024 itself. The NSO under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation publishes the data of CPI. Also, this is used for deciding the policy rate, that is repo rate, by the Monetary Policy Committee, which is headed by the Governor of RBI. This WPI wholesale price index that represents the prices of goods at wholesale stage, that is goods that are sold in bulk and traded between organizations and traders, not between people like me and you, not between the retailers. It is not bought by the retailers. And if you look into the wholesale price index, majorly it is the weightage that is provided all commodities, that major weight is to primary articles, then food and power having less weightage, and manufactured products are having more weightage in this particular WPI. And then the PPI, that is Purchaser Price Index, that measures the wholesale price from the point of view of producers of goods and services, tracking prices at different stages of production, and they looks at inflation from the viewpoint of industry and businesses and measures price changes before consumers purchases the final goods and services. It gives an idea to the business houses that whether cost of raw material is increasing, whether cost of processing is increasing, whether cost of transportation is increasing. Accordingly, they can change their business strategies. Now, what exactly we can, another thing that we can understand, that indeed the inflation is nearly every other major subgroup, that is fuel and light, housing, tobacco and miscellaneous category, that was higher than October last year. The impact of GST rate cut has so far been seen only in the clothing and the footwear category. When GST is rationalized, the GST has been reduced significantly. That also should reflect in the inflation, but it is majorly being seen in the clothing and footwear category. The only apart from the food to see inflation lower than the last year. Also, all this shows just how skewed the inflation measure is. Not only it is outdated with the base year set as 2012, but the weightage are no longer accurate and more often obscure rather than clarify. Because as of now, if any person is having 100 rupees, at 50% or 46% of that is not being spent on the food and beverages itself. Rather, people are buying the goods like clothing, footwear, etc. And a major portion is going towards that also. People are going for the recreational activities, people are going for the movies, etc. People are also spending on Netflix, etc., internet, etc. People are also spending on housing for giving rents, etc. And that is the reason this weightage that is given to the CPI that needs to be rationalized to give us a true picture about the inflation in the economy. And that is the reason the urgency behind the update is not just because of this vast gap between the measured and the perceived inflation. It is also because the RBI's Monetary Policy Committee, who took CPI combined as one of the index for going for the policy rates, and they takes this CPI as its benchmark whenever they decide the policy rate. So if they are not getting the true picture about the inflation in the economy, the policy rate will also not be proper, and which can create the macroeconomic consequences for us. The Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation has said that the new series of CPI will be ready in the first quarter of next financial year with the new base year of 2024. Next topic is that India's carbon emission rise slower this year. That is said by one of the report of the Global Carbon Project, and this is related to your GS paper 3, Conservation, Environmental Pollution and Degradation, and this has appeared in today's The Hindu page number 14. So India's 2025 carbon emission have increased slowly compared to the last year, while the global carbon emissions are expected to rise to 38 billion tons or by 1.1% this year. The growth in India's emission is expected to increase by 1.4% according to the Global Carbon Project. Also, in India's emission grew 4% than the previous year. The slower increase was partially due to the favorable monsoon that reduced the cooling demand, the use of AC, etc. that we do, as well as strong growth in renewable energy, the expansion of EV, for example, with the FAME or Pradhan Mantri Surya Ghar Yojana, etc., PM Kusum Yojana, Krishi Sinchai Yojana. Also, the China's emission in 2024 are projected to increase by 0.4%, also slower growth than in the recent year, and that too because of push towards the renewable, push towards the EV. The emissions are projected to grow in United States at about 1.9% and European Union at about 0.4% in 2025. Overall, India is the third largest emitter of carbon at 3.2 billion tons annually in 2024 and led by US, that is 4.9 billion ton, and China 12 billion ton. India's per capita emission is 2.2 tons of carbon dioxide per year. Also, the projected rise in global fossil CO2 emission in 2025 is driven by all the fuels, for example coal, and interestingly, the coal contributes more than 70% for India's electricity generation as per the electricity statistics from MOSPI. Also, oil contributes 1% in increase, natural gas 1.3%. And over the period of 2015-24, the emissions from permanent deforestation remained high, around 4 billion tons of CO2 per year. Also, the remaining carbon budget to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius is virtually exhausted. We will not be able to achieve that. The remaining budget for 1.5 degrees Celsius is 170 billion ton of CO2. Also, while CO2 emissions are still increasing, keeping global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius is no longer plausible. This was said by one of the professors of Global Systems, Exeter's Global System Institute. Also, the latest number come even as the world leaders are gathered at Belém, Brazil, to attempt progress in transitioning away from fossil fuel use, while also negotiating how to pay the cost of bolstering defense against the effect of human-caused climate change that is already underway. India is also took various initiatives, for example, International Solar Alliance or the Global Biofuel Policy, Global Biofuel Alliance, that India also take a leap while going for that Global Biofuel Alliance. In India also, the biofuel policy, the different generations which has been covered for the ethanol making, and the ethanol blending program which we have already achieved for the 20% E20, or other for the solar that we have discussed, Pradhan Mantri Surya Ghar Yojana, FAME India schemes, etc., the incentives that are given for the EV adoption. Also, this is the comparison that you can draw. For example, there can be one of the questions that might be asked in your examination, that which are the sectors which contribute highly for the overall emissions. So, power industry, and then we have the industrial combustion and processes. However, this may slightly increase and decrease with the year. And then the countries that have emitted the most CO2 emissions till date, that is till 2024, if there is a question that is coming according to that. So United States is the country which has emitted most CO2 till 2024, and then we have the China, Russia, Germany. India comes at much later stage. Next topic is features of Ricin toxin at the center of alleged terror plot, and this is related to your GS paper 3, linkages of organized crime with terrorism, and this has appeared in today's Indian Express, page number 26, or explained. So earlier this week, the Gujarat ATS arrested one of the doctors along with 3 other men that who earned his medical degree from China, and they were trying to produce a lethal chemical weapon which is known as ricin. And this ricin is a protein that is extracted from castor bean, and this castor bean is a crop that is largely grown for the production of castor oil in countries such as India, Brazil and China. And castor oil has several benefits, like it is used for addressing the issue of hair fall, for various skin diseases. And this plant is widely available, and the poison is not very difficult to extract from the seeds. Yes, yet the substance can be very lethal. Even 1 milligram mixed in food can kill an adult itself. And once absorbed, it attaches itself to ribosomes, which are the tiny structures found in cells that are responsible for reading the genetic codes and synthesizing the proteins. So the synthesis of proteins is happening with the help of ribosomes, and once they attach, they binds with this ribosomes. It stops protein synthesis in cell, and depending on which cell absorbs the poison, a person can suffer mild organ failure or even death. Also, the ricin may seep out if the seed is bitten or it is cracked when a person or any of the child ingests that particular ricin seed, that particular castor seed. And when it comes to castor oil, the processing ensures that there is no ricin in it, and that is the reason castor oil is not as such lethal. The ingesting ricin can lead to severe vomiting and diarrhea and low blood pressure. It can also lead to hallucinations, seizures and breathing difficulties. And this is Schedule 1 toxin under the Chemical Weapon Convention. It has been used in World War I, World War II, and most widely known criminal use of compound was to kill the Bulgaria journalist in London in 1978. And this Chemical Weapons Convention opened for signature in Paris on 13 January 1993. Within the first 2 days, 130 nations signed the convention and it entered into force on 29 April 1997. It is the world's first multilateral disarmament agreement to provide for elimination of entire category of weapons of mass destruction within a fixed time frame itself. Also, when we were saying that this ricin attaches itself to ribosome, whose main function is protein synthesis, we also can see the major parts of cell. For example, there is cell membrane or plasma membrane that controls the entry and exit, and that also maintains the shape of the cell. Then we have the cytoplasm, which is the site of all the metabolic activities that happen in the cell itself. They also holds various organelles like vacuoles, etc. that are there. Nucleus that stores the DNA and they also controls the cell activities. Mitochondria, that is also called as the powerhouse of the cell, they produces the energy. Then ribosomes, they synthesizes the protein. Then Golgi apparatus that modifies, packages and transports the proteins. And then lysosomes is there, which leads to digestion and waste removal. Vacuole that store, for example, large central vacuole maintain the turgor in the plant itself. There are small vacuoles that are available in the animal cell. Chloroplast that leads to that helps in photosynthesis in plants. Cell wall in plants that provides the structural support and protection. And then there is centrioles that helps in cell division. Our next topic is anti-dumping duty on steel from Vietnam. This is related to your GS paper 3, trade, growth and development, and this has appeared in today's Indian Express page number 25. So India has imposed an anti-dumping duty of around $1 to 1.55 per ton on imports of hot rolled flat steel product from Vietnam for 5 years. What exactly is the anti-dumping duty? If a company export a product at a price lower than the price it normally charges in the home country, and this particular exercise is called as dumping the product. Government has to establish that dumping is causing material or genuine injury to domestic industry. For example, if this hot rolled flat steel product are being sold at 100 rupees in Vietnam and now they are deliberately selling it at 80 rupees in India, that is the fit case of imposition of anti-dumping duty. Why? Because of this lower prices that they are charging in Indian economy, the Indian industry, Indian sector related to hot rolled flat, they will be impacted, and that will cause the material or genuine injury to Indian sectors. To address that, anti-dumping duty is applied so that the price of this product is also around this 100 rupees, which is the normal market price in Indian economy. We also have the countervailing duty. If the domestic producers are hurt by the imports of subsidized product, countervailing duty can be imposed. If there is a product of cost of 100 rupees, government is deliberately giving the subsidy on that product, let's suppose to support that particular sector or that particular company, and now they are selling that product in 80 rupees, then the countervailing duties can be imposed to offset the subsidy that was provided. Safeguard action that allows a country to temporarily restrict import of a product if its domestic industry is injured or threatened with injury due to an import surge. The benefits of anti-dumping duty is that it can prevent monopolies, because there may be a case this company, when they are selling their products are at much cheaper prices, that will also impact the other countries. Slowly and gradually, the other companies might leave the market itself, and that may be a case of monopoly of that company itself. Similarly, it protects the vulnerable industries which are vulnerable to the deep discounts that can be given by other countries. Provide time to firms to compete with the products. They can also shift to the better technologies. They cannot also shift to better alternative source of their raw materials, so that they can also compete with the cost of that product. Also, they can preserve the jobs, the labor intensive sectors, the people who are dependent on that sector. But there are some issues. For example, this is against the free trade concept, which is again promoted by the World Trade Organization. This is also a trade barriers that also lowers the economic growth. Also, it protects firms from competition, and it also hurts consumer, because consumer can get the particular product at much lower prices if the anti-dumping duty or countervailing duties are not levied. Also, it distorts the market. The free market is impacted. This is all from today's Analyst. Thank you very much. All the very best. Keep studying.